There was no explosion, no final battle that shook the ancient world, no single day when millions of Romans suddenly realized their empire was over. When the last emperor of the Western Roman Empire lost his throne in the year 476, the event itself was surprisingly quiet. The streets of Italy did not fall silent overnight. Markets still opened, merchants still crossed the Mediterranean, farmers still worked their fields. Life continued. Yet history would remember that moment as the end of one of the greatest civilizations ever built. The real question is not why Rome fell. The real question is why almost no one realized it was already falling. To understand that mystery, we have to travel back nearly 5 centuries to a time when Rome appeared completely unstoppable. Under Augustus, the empire entered an age unlike anything the Mediterranean had ever seen. Civil wars came to an end. Trade flourished across thousands of miles. Roman roads connected distant provinces with astonishing efficiency. Aqueducts carried fresh water into growing cities. Its laws created order across cultures that spoke different languages and worshipped different gods. For many people, Rome no longer looked like a kingdom. It looked like the natural center of the world. Success followed success. Generation after generation grew up believing that Rome's greatness was permanent. Few stopped to ask a dangerous question. What happens when an empire becomes so successful that it begins believing it cannot fail? That illusion survived long after Augustus. Even during the reign of Marcus Aurelius, one of Rome's most respected emperors, the empire remained immense. Enemies threatened the borders. A devastating plague swept across the provinces. But Rome endured. Marcus Aurelius ruled with discipline, restraint, and a deep sense of responsibility. Many historians see his reign as the last chapter of Rome's golden age. Then, in the year 180, everything changed. Marcus Aurelius died. The throne passed to his son, Commodus. For the first time in generations, the empire was led not by the most capable candidate, but by inheritance alone. Commodus saw the empire very differently from his father. Instead of strengthening the institutions that had made Rome powerful, he focused increasingly on his own prestige. Public spectacles grew more extravagant. Political rivals multiplied. Confidence inside the government slowly began to weaken. The empire remained rich. Its armies were still feared. Its borders still stretched across 3 continents. From the outside, almost nothing seemed different. That was exactly what made the danger so difficult to see. The strongest walls often hide the deepest cracks. After Commodus was assassinated, Rome entered one of the most chaotic periods in its history. Within a single year, several men claimed the imperial throne. Some bought support, others relied on loyal soldiers. Power was no longer passing peacefully. It was being negotiated, challenged, and sometimes decided by whoever commanded the strongest army. That pattern would reshape the empire for generations. The Roman legions had always protected the empire. Now they were beginning to influence who ruled it. Each succession became more uncertain. Each political crisis encouraged ambitious generals to seek greater authority. Every civil conflict consumed soldiers, money, and public trust. None of these struggles destroyed Rome on their own. Together, they slowly changed the rules that had once kept the empire stable. While emperors fought for power, another problem quietly grew beneath the surface. The empire had become astonishingly expensive to govern. Its frontiers stretched for thousands of miles. Every fortress required supplies. Every province required administrators. Every road demanded maintenance. Every legion expected payment. For centuries, conquest had helped finance expansion. New territories brought wealth, resources, and taxes, but Rome eventually reached the limits of expansion. The empire could no longer rely on constant victories to support its growing costs. Instead, it depended increasingly on heavier taxation and a more complex bureaucracy. At first, these measures appeared manageable. Then, inflation began to erode confidence in Roman currency. Prices became less predictable. Trade became more difficult. Local communities increasingly focused on their own survival rather than the prosperity of the empire as a whole. These changes did not happen in a single year. They unfolded across generations. That made them even more dangerous. Most Romans adapted one challenge at a time. Very few realized those challenges were connected. By the middle of the 3rd century, the pressure could no longer be contained. Emperors rose and fell with alarming speed. Several ruled for only months before being replaced. Civil wars drained precious resources. Frontiers became harder to defend. At the same time, new enemies tested Rome's borders from multiple directions. The empire that had once dictated events was now reacting to them. And for the first time in centuries, Rome was no longer shaping history. It was struggling to keep up with it.
Before we go on, I invite you to subscribe to see more content like this. All right, let's continue. The crisis that had been building for decades finally exploded. Historians would later call it the crisis of the 3rd century. For the people living through it, it simply felt like the world they knew was coming apart. Between the years 235 and 284, Rome was trapped in an almost endless cycle of instability. Emperors rose to power with astonishing speed. Many were removed just as quickly. Some died in battle, others fell victim to political conspiracies. A few ruled for only a matter of months. Every change at the top sent shockwaves across the empire. Governors hesitated. Generals calculated their next move. Merchants delayed investments. Ordinary families wondered who would be ruling the following year. Confidence, once Rome's greatest advantage, slowly disappeared. As political chaos spread, enemies sensed opportunity. Along the Rhine and Danube frontiers, Germanic tribes increased their pressure on Roman territory. In the east, the powerful Sasanian Empire challenged Rome's authority like no rival had in generations. For the first time in centuries, the empire found itself fighting major threats on multiple fronts at once. The Roman army remained disciplined. Its commanders remained capable. Its soldiers still displayed extraordinary courage. But no army, no matter how experienced, can be everywhere at the same time. Each new emergency forced difficult choices. Protect one frontier, and another became vulnerable. Send reinforcements north, and the eastern provinces faced greater danger. Every solution created a new problem. By the middle of the 3rd century, the empire itself briefly split apart. In the west, the Gallic Empire declared its independence. In the east, the wealthy city of Palmyra emerged as a rival center of power. For a moment, the Roman world that had taken centuries to build no longer answered to a single government. The illusion of an indivisible empire had finally been broken. Yet Rome refused to disappear. One emperor after another fought desperately to hold it together. Some succeeded for a while. Others failed almost immediately. Then, in 284, a soldier named Diocletian seized power. Unlike many of his predecessors, he understood that Rome's greatest enemy was no longer a single invading army. The empire had simply become too vast for one man to govern alone. Instead of pretending nothing had changed, Diocletian transformed the system itself. He divided the administration of the empire between multiple rulers. He reorganized the provinces, strengthened the borders, expanded the bureaucracy, and reformed the tax system to stabilize imperial finances. His changes were bold. Some proved unpopular, but they worked. For the first time in decades, Rome regained a measure of stability. It was not the triumphant empire of Augustus, but it was no longer collapsing. Many believed the crisis had finally ended. In reality, it had only been delayed. A generation later, another remarkable leader emerged: Constantine. He reunited the empire under a single emperor and launched reforms that would permanently reshape Roman history. He founded Constantinople, a magnificent new capital positioned between Europe and Asia. Its location offered strategic advantages that Rome itself no longer possessed. Trade flourished. Administration became more efficient. The eastern half of the empire grew stronger with every passing decade. But every decision carries consequences. As Constantinople rose, the political importance of the old city of Rome gradually declined. Power was no longer concentrated where it had once been. The empire still existed, yet it was beginning to evolve into something fundamentally different. Meanwhile, outside its borders, Europe was changing. Entire peoples were on the move. Some sought new lands. Others fled pressures from even more distant migrations. Many entered Roman territory not as conquerors, but as refugees seeking protection. Rome had absorbed outsiders before. For centuries, that had been one of its greatest strengths. This time was different. The empire no longer possessed the stability, resources, or political unity that had once allowed it to integrate new populations with confidence. One decision would soon reveal just how fragile the situation had become. In the year 376, thousands of Goths were allowed to cross the Danube and settle inside Roman territory. The agreement could have strengthened the empire. Instead, corruption, poor administration, and broken promises turned a potential alliance into a growing crisis. Desperate communities that had expected safety found themselves mistreated by local officials. Tension became anger. Anger became rebellion. 2 years later, near the city of Adrianople, Rome suffered one of the most devastating defeats in its history. The Eastern Emperor Valens was killed during the battle. An entire Roman field army was destroyed. The loss sent a message that echoed across the ancient world. Rome could still fight, but it was no longer invincible. From that moment forward, every neighboring power understood something that had once seemed impossible. The empire could bleed. The empire could fail. And if it could fail, one day it could fall. The final chapter had begun.